Maybe you saw him earlier, but it is my pleasure to announce a friend and colleague, Mr. Charles Brown. Charles is a self-proclaimed street-level researcher working at the intersection of transportation, health, class, race, gender, and politics. He's a senior researcher with the Alan M. Voorhees Transportation Center, an adjunct professor at the Edward Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy at Rutgers. And his work has been published in several international journals and featured or quoted in New York Times, Streets Blog, City Lab, and other national and local media outlets. And why isn't this playing? Okay. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Christina. Good afternoon. Today I want to talk about a much larger study, well, a smaller version of a much larger study. And what I mean by that, I want to share the qualitative piece of the study with you of a much broader quantitative piece. And the reason being is because too often I hear the quote that without data, all you have is an opinion. However, I think the opinion of lived experience is valued just as much as those that we try to quantify, as opposed to the qualitative data that doesn't get enough attention. So I'm going to share with you the qualitative piece of a much larger study. And this study examines the impact of crime on walking in low-income and minority communities. In terms of the purpose of the study, we conducted focus groups, and the purpose of the focus groups was to understand real and perceived crime, how real and perceived crime affect walking frequency in 3 different culturally diverse cities in New Jersey. When I say real, we actually had the crime data from all 3 towns for a period of 5+ years, and we mapped those using GIS. Perceived, of course, were the opinions of the people that were involved in these different focus groups. So our conversations during the focus group explored crime, conceptualization of safety, and their overall experiences regarding walking within each of the communities. We also probed the extent of confidence in police response and overall perceptions of safety. And lastly, we showed them 3 different images and solicited their reactions and perceptions of safety in response to those images, and I'll do the same with you today. When it comes to the focus group approach and overview, we convened 6 focus groups in late fall of 2017, and we held 2 focus groups each in 3 towns, one being Newark, New Jersey, one being Bloomfield, New Jersey, and Verona. If you're not familiar, I'll provide a little context later. But the towns basically border each other with the exception of Verona, which is, I think, 2 towns over. We grouped participants and the facilitators by sex, meaning I facilitated the male-only focus group, and I'm using male and female very broadly here, so I hope it's not offensive in any way. And we had a female facilitator facilitate the female-only focus group. And the reason why we did that is because we believe that a male being interviewed by a female when you're talking about perceptions of safety would lead to sort of unreliable data. Most men would say, I'm never afraid. And we sort of tested this briefly on ourselves, and that is actually true. We would do that. Also, we asked questions around, very sensitive items about, have you been physically assaulted? And what we found is that women may not feel comfortable, or men, talking about that in the presence of the opposite sex. So we thought it was wise to group the facilitators according to the sex and gender of the participants. We held these focus groups from 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. because we wanted to capture people at times that they are available. We also gave $50 cash to each participant in attendance. We did not give a $50 gift card. We gave $50 cash, so you can walk away right then and there and spend that how you wish without any fees imposed upon your receipt of your cash. We also provided food and refreshments to each participant. I do not believe in hosting any focus group without paying people for their time, because I strongly believe that if you ask me a question and I have the answer to that question, I am the expert, not you. So I think they should be compensated accordingly. Also, we recruited participants through 3 community development corporations. The reason why we did that, because I'm well aware of how people of color perceive government entities, and it is not enough for us to assume that because we are Rutgers, they're going to show up on our behalf. So we use the trusted advocate model, which is the people that know them best, to organize and recruit these focus group participants. So we had 67 participants attend, 26 were men and 37 were women. They identified as such. When it comes to the context, Bloomfield, Newark, and Verona, here are the three cities here. First, starting from the left, you have Bloomfield Township, which is a population of 48,000. It is a majority non-white town. It is sort of in the middle of the two in terms of how you would perceive it to be. It's like the first ring suburb of Newark, and Verona would be a much further out suburb. The population of Newark is around 281,000, and of course, it is a majority non-white. Verona, the last, has a population of 14,000, and it is 85% white, so it is majority white. Getting at the participants, we asked questions about their household composition and their responsibilities, and what we found is that participants from Bloomfield and Verona were more likely to be in a household with two parents and children. So as you're moving away from the city, which is Newark, to Bloomfield and Verona, this is what you get. They were more likely to be in households with two parents and children. The Newark participants, in particular, the men resided in apartments with several members of their families, and the women also had sort of varied living arrangements. When we asked about their primary mode of transport, we learned that in Newark, they rely heavily on transit, car share, bicycling, and their family members. Many of them also stated that prior to Uber, their family members operated as Uber or Lyft in the families, many of which are women who were responsible for getting people to and from places on a daily basis. The Verona and Bloomfield participants were more likely, because they had higher access to car ownership, to drive and to walk recreationally. Moving forward, when we look at some of the summary of the participants' sort of perspectives, the first thing we touched on was neighborhood safety. And here you have a photo from the West Ward of Newark, which is one of the most crime-ridden wards in probably all of the city. But what you found here is that half of the Newark participants had been robbed and assaulted. 2/3 believe, though, that it's safer for them to be there than it is for you. Almost half of the Newark men also stated that these events impacted their walking habits. So the fact that they had been robbed and assaulted, you would assume, right, it would impact your walking habits. When you choose to walk, where you choose to walk, and what time you choose to walk. When you compare this, though, to the Verona and the Bloomfield participants, they weren't concerned at all when it came to crime as much as the Newark participants were. Their main concern was traffic. So we went into this thinking very broadly, of course, about safety, but we were more focused on the impact of crime on walking frequency and propensity, not the impact of traffic. But what we learned in asking these questions is that traffic was more of a concern for Bloomfield and Verona. So what I want to do now is humanize this by letting you hear some of the things that we heard during the focus group, which is when it came to Verona, the people said, well, it's the same people that have been here for the past 30 years. It's like family when we asked them about neighborhood safety. If you remember, Verona was the 85% white population. I want you to see, compare that to what we heard in Newark. People said, what goes on in the street goes. I see, but I don't see. And what we're talking about here is crime and what's happening to other people in your community and the need to not respond to or act like it is happening, so that deserves a little more attention. For instance, a person said, I was mugged, saw a lady on the porch, and she didn't help me. Why is that the case in a place like Newark and not a place like Bloomfield and Verona? So moving forward here, looking at other perspectives, such as walking habits and behavior, in Newark, walking is done to sort of complete their daily tasks, regardless of the season. And as you may or may not know, we don't have the weather you have here in New Jersey. The weather we experience all 4 seasons, it really feels more like 2 seasons, winter and winter. But these people are choosing to walk for their daily tasks, regardless of the season. But time does play a major role due to crime. So they're choosing, if they can avoid to not walk during the nighttime. This was really interesting in that women, and we just heard other presentations about parks, they decided to drive to the nearest park instead of walking to the park. And I'm sure many of you would know why, but it had a lot to do with fears around being robbed, being assaulted, being catcalled, just simply being harassed on the street while walking to those parks. And also in Newark, and this is a future research topic for those of you who are interested, they told us that we should avoid numbered streets. Now, I had not heard any relationship to crime and numbered streets before, but what I do know, having grown up in Mississippi, lived in Florida, and worked around the country, there are street names that people tend to avoid. For instance, if I say Martin Luther King Boulevard, what image comes to mind? In the South, if you say Division Street, there are images that come to mind, or Main Street. Or if you are not familiar with those, I say across the tracks. Maybe you get the relationship here. So numbered streets are places that they say they tend to not walk to out of fear of crime and whatever else takes place. We didn't go too deep into that. But Bloomfield and Verona had higher access to cars, and they were comfortable walking anywhere and at all times, except for their concerns around traffic safety. So in Verona, they say, hey, there's not much that can happen. They were very honest, and we were very appreciative. But in Newark, they said, I don't walk at night because I was mugged a few years ago. And then one of the seniors in the focus group, going back to the earlier study, I don't know if you all caught this or not, but the senior stopped me in the middle of the presentation or the facilitation of the focus group and said, I'm a senior and I carry a weapon when I walk. I hate to admit it, but we had not frisked anyone prior to doing the focus group. And we didn't think going into this that we probably needed to run metal detectors by people. But whatever weapon he had at the time, we dealt with it. It was a peaceful outcome, and we moved on. But FYI, going into these focus groups, I think it's important to have a conversation about whether or not people are actually carrying a weapon while in your presence, because anything could have gone wrong there. Thankfully, it did not. But it was also interesting to learn that we have seniors walking around with weapons. And I don't know if you know this or not, but in the state of New Jersey, just like New York, you don't want to get caught with an unlicensed gun or anything like that. So it was shocking to hear that. When it came to the impact of crime and safety on their walking, once again, the Newark residents stated that safety varies by time of day, by neighborhood, and by street. But they also, when it came to land use, stated that they avoid places known for violent and property crimes. So if there were land uses within the city of Newark that are known for having property crimes or violent crimes occur near them, then they simply try to avoid those places. What we learned in the focus group with the women from Newark is that they were forced to strategize when, where, and how they walk in different ways. So even prior to exiting their homes, there's this process they go through to determine what's the safest route to get me from point A to point B. Now, in choosing the safest route, many of them admitted to walking in places that wasn't safe from traffic. It was safe from men primarily, but it wasn't safe from traffic. And if you know the city of Newark, it has one of the highest fatality rates in the state of New Jersey. In Bloomfield and Verona, as you can see a theme here, that was no impact. One of the women stated, I'm up for grabs because I'm wearing lipstick. I don't know how that feels, but it broke my heart to hear that, to hear the audio tape associated with that a woman cannot walk down the street with lipstick on out of fear of being harassed or assaulted by men. They also stated that I have to think about what I'm wearing. I can't wear gym clothes while walking. We've all seen sort of the trend that is going on. More and more women are choosing to wear gym clothes. In the context of Newark and what we learned from this focus group, that may now come with a caution. Because we're learning that that is unfortunately drawing the wrong energy to that population. When it comes to confidence in local police, we're very upfront about asking these questions because in many ways, the discussion about the social determinants of health has to take into account the impact of policing on the health outcomes of minorities. And so we asked questions about police, and what we found in Newark, they stated that police are not approachable and are not from the community. So they spoke in regards to the police being seen as an occupying force in their communities. They also stated that we're not welcome in certain communities while walking. I'll get into that a little later, but Newark is a big city, and you could imagine that there are different ethnic neighborhoods, and they stated that they were not welcome while walking. What was really interesting also was that in Newark, they felt safer with crime than around police. They felt safer with crime than around police because they felt that the police officers there had limited credibility and they didn't have the trust with that community. Of course, it was in this focus group unanimous trust in the police in Verona and Bloomfield, but they also trusted their neighbors, unlike the people in Newark, to help them in a time of trouble. Here are some of the quotes that came from that. I feel safer with the crime than around the police. I called the police and they didn't come. Those were both quotes from Newark. Now moving on to the reaction to different street images, I'm gonna have you participate here with me. When you see these images, just scream out sort of what are some of the positive characteristics associated with this built environment. Anyone?
Trees.
Trees, what else? Sidewalks. What else? Keep going. You didn't know Newark, Jersey was this beautiful, right? Keep going. Keep going.
History.
All right, so when we asked them, they noted some of the same things, right? That it appeared to be safe and comfortable. They noted the street lights, the wide sidewalks, the trees, and the people. So when it comes to the built environment characteristics, they are well aware, whether they're Bloomfield, Verona, or Newark, what makes for a safe and a welcoming environment. Here's a second photo. Same exercise, keep going. Fast cars, what else? No lighting, what else?
Narrow sidewalks.
Narrow sidewalks, anything else?
Trees.
Boring, good answer. We did not get that answer, but that's, we should invite you to the next focus group. They noticed safety and comfort, but they did question walking at night, and it had a lot to do with, of course, you're not seeing lighting here, but this is in more of a suburban context. Here's the third image. What do you think they said?
Dangerous.
Dangerous, what else?
Dark.
Dark, what else? So I'll tell you really quickly here. We showed them 3 images of where ideal conditions that we thought would improve their walking to get their response, but we also showed them 3 images where we knew were the most dangerous places based on the real crime in the community. This wasn't one of them. But what we did note is that half of the Newark men stated they still would feel safe in this environment. All but one of the Verona and the Bloomfield participants felt this way. Ironically or interestingly, this place is in Bloomfield and is near the train station that many of the people take each and every day. So what is about this sort of adaptability of the Newark men to crime in their community? The average person, when they see this, would say, this looks very unsafe. So to kind of wrap things up here, we asked the different people from the different focus groups about the other cities. For instance, if you were from Newark, we asked you if you thought Bloomfield and Verona were safe. If you were from Bloomfield, we asked you, did you think Newark and Bloomfield were safe? And lastly, if you were from Bloomfield, we asked you if you thought Newark and Verona were safe. What do you think was said? What do you think Bloomfield and Verona said about Newark? What do you think Bloomfield said about Newark and Verona? Not safe. Well, so here's what we found. Newark thought that both Bloomfield and Verona were safe to walk in, with one exception. They thought they would be racially profiled for walking there. Bloomfield thought Newark was dangerous, but it thought Verona was safe. Verona thought both Newark and Bloomfield were unsafe. So you can see here how the perception is, how it relates to people's perception of the different environments and what history may have taught them there. So here's some policy recommendations. We need to change the culture of policing and improve community and police relations. We need to encourage and advocate for quality infrastructure. We need to change the culture of harassment, build more community-based leadership capacity, and dedicate funding to environmental justice communities. And I want to end with, most people ask me, okay, how should I focus my energy? And so here's the socio-ecological model, a framework for prevention within the health field. I feel very smart. I just learned this as a planner like 2 weeks ago. I was like, this is really cool because it's how I think about things. But people usually ask, when we are dealing with racism or white supremacy or trying to address equity, what can we do? Well, when I speak about that in the context of public health and planning, I'm not talking about the individual. I think we, for the most part, move beyond that. We can do better when it comes to how we talk about these issues when other minorities aren't around, meaning how you talk to your friends. I think we need to improve there. We certainly need to improve when it comes to communities, institution, and society as a whole. So I just want to quickly say we need to focus a lot of our energy on the societal aspects, not necessarily on the individual aspects. So when you hear conversations about racism, white supremacy, don't get all defensive. We're not talking about you. We're talking about society as a whole because it's the system that we need to address. So here's some special acknowledgement. DOT funded the study along with the Federal Highway Administration. These are the corporations we work with, and here are my colleagues who worked on the story. Thank you very much.